So what does 2026 really have in store for us? Well, to figure that out, we've sifted through, get this, over 2,000 different predictions from some of the smartest analysts and institutions on the planet. All right, let's jump right in and see what they're all pointing towards.
And right out of the gate, we're hit with this huge central paradox. I mean, think about that for a second. How can your investments have their best year ever while the world itself feels like it's on shaky ground? This tension, this contradiction, that's the key to understanding everything about 2026.
So, yeah, how can both of those things possibly be true at the same time? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down right now.
The best way to describe the overall mood or the vibe for the year is this really weird blend. You've got this incredible optimism for the markets, but it's happening right alongside some serious global turbulence. It's kind of like trying to navigate a bull market in the middle of a hurricane.
You can really see those two powerful opposing forces at play here. On one side, you have this amazing tailwind for the markets. We're talking stimulus, easy money, less regulation. But on the other side, the global stage is just full of friction, with all the old rules getting thrown out the window.
And this quote from Morgan Stanley just nails the mindset shift. They're calling it the year of risk reboot. Why? Because for the first time in a while, the focus is shifting away from those big, scary economic worries and zooming right in on how individual companies are actually performing.
Now, this is the engine driving all that market optimism. It's called the policy triumvirate. And what you need to know is that seeing these three things, government spending, low interest rates, and deregulation, all working together is incredibly rare unless we're in a deep recession. That's why analysts are paying so much attention to it.
Okay, so if you had to point to one single thing behind all this optimism, it would be artificial intelligence. But the story here has taken a really fascinating turn.
You see, we're moving way beyond just using AI as a simple tool. The huge story for 2026 is what's being called agentic AI. This isn't about an AI that just answers your questions. We're talking about AI becoming an active, autonomous partner. Basically, a digital colleague that can plan things out and get stuff done on its own.
And just look at how fast this is expected to happen. I mean, this is staggering. Deloitte is predicting that 3/4 of all companies could be investing in this kind of tech by the end of the year. That's not evolution, that's a revolution.
And if you want to know what that looks like in the real world, check out this vision from Microsoft. It's not about replacing humans, it's about making them superheroes. A tiny team of 3 people can launch a massive global campaign in just a few days because the AI is doing all the heavy lifting on the data side.
And here it is, the big economic payoff. For years and years, we've heard these promises about tech making us more productive, but it never really showed up in the economic numbers. Well, 2026 is the year experts believe that finally changes. We're about to see it in a big, measurable way.
Which leads to the multi-trillion-dollar question, right? If AI is really boosting productivity this much, how is that actually going to translate into the financial markets?
And that brings us right to Wall Street's front door. The consensus among all the big players is just overwhelmingly positive. It's creating this powerful tailwind that investors are getting ready to ride.
Just take a look at these numbers. What's so wild isn't just that the targets are high, it's how close they all are. I mean, from Bank of America all the way up to Morgan Stanley, basically everyone is seeing strong double-digit growth for the S&P 500.
But here's the most important part. How we get to those high numbers. This isn't about hype or a bubble. No way. The forecast is for actual company earnings to grow like crazy, so the growth is coming from real profits, even while investors remain a little skeptical. That's a really healthy sign.
But it's not just about stocks. See that big number for gold? That's the other side of the paradox we talked about. It tells you that even with all the optimism, big players and central banks are still hedging their bets against all that global turbulence.
Which brings us neatly to the other half of this story. Because while the markets might be flying high, the world itself is becoming a much more difficult, much more contentious place.
This one number says it all. A peak tariff rate of over 12%. That's the highest it has been in nearly 100 years. The whole era of easy, frictionless global trade, yeah, that's over. This is the new normal.
And a huge driver of this new friction is China's big strategic shift. They're facing some economic problems at home, so they're doubling down on making things and exporting them. And while that might help them, it also risks flooding the rest of the world with cheap goods, which could easily spark some pretty intense new trade battles.
You know, the very nature of global conflict is changing too. This term, gray zone provocations, just captures it perfectly. It's not all-out war, but it's definitely not peace. It's this constant, simmering, ambient rivalry that's always pushing boundaries and testing alliances.
And these gray zone conflicts, they're happening in completely new places. We're not just talking about competition on land anymore. Now, the new front lines are up in the Arctic, in orbit around the Earth, deep on the seafloor, and of course, all across cyberspace. Okay, so let's pull all of this together. We've got these two massive competing forces, a market that's booming thanks to AI, and a world that's fracturing under all this tension. So what's the big takeaway here?
You know, the real lesson from all of this isn't memorizing a specific target for the S&P 500. The real value is in understanding the huge themes where pretty much all the experts agree. The massive build-out of AI, the fact that tariffs are here to stay, this new kind of global competition. These are the powerful currents that are going to be shaping our world in 2026 and for a long time after.
And that brings us full circle, right back to that central paradox. We're left with this one last huge question to think about. In a world where technology is racing ahead while the global order is pulling apart, which one of those two powerful forces is going to win out and ultimately define what comes next?